scripture passage this morning comes from the Psalms, the 8th Psalm. Here is the prayer from the psalmist. O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouths of babes and infants, you have founded a bulwark because of your foes, to silence the enemy and the avenger. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, I think, what are human beings that you are mindful of them? Mortals, that you care for them. Yet you have made them a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. You have given them dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under their feet, all sheep and oxen, and also beasts of the field, the birds of the air, and the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the paths of the seas. O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Here ends the reading of God's holy word. May God bless it for our hearing and understanding. The psalmist who wrote this prayer looked up one night into the star-lit sky, the pre-industrial sky, of course, with no light pollution. The darkness and the expanse was lit up every evening by millions of stars, far more than any person can count. The psalmist looked in the starlit night and wrote down this prayer. This wasn't the first time this person had looked up into the night sky. Such words do not flow from a single glance. It's reasonable to guess that she would have sat and looked at the night sky night after night in her village. She was familiar with the Big and Little Dippers, as we call them. The uniqueness of the North Star. And maybe wondered why Venus and that little red Mars do not twinkle like the other stars. Because, of course, she couldn't have known they were planets. Maybe her father or grandmother had taught her the constellations, or she had pointed them out to her children. This prayer was written by someone curious about science before we had a word for it. And it made her curious about God and about her own human life and about the life that we all share on this planet. What are human beings that God is mindful of them? She asks in the prayer. Yes, what are human beings that God is mindful of us? Mortals, that God should care for us. A few years ago, my family and I were traveling on our own summer vacation, and we were traveling through the Grand Canyon. We rafted the Colorado River 8 days and 7 nights through the canyon. And one night, I woke up in the middle of the night and the heat of the desert had evaporated and the coldness of the night air had descended, and I sat up to pull the sleeping bag over top of me. The 20-some folks that were on this week cruise together down the Colorado River, everyone was asleep. I could hear the raging river 15 feet away from me. Its waves and sparkles and jumps. I could see the twinkling of the starlight. And I laid back down into the cot and just looked into the sky. It was crystal clear. Millions of stars. The same sky that this psalmist saw. That we who live in cities now with light pollution don't often see. There was the North Star and the Milky Way, which I hadn't seen in decades, across the sky. Sat there, laid back in that cot, I don't know how long, just watching the stars. Long enough that I could see them start to swirl around the North Star, and some of the stars were going off over the canyon wall and then on the other side, new stars began popping out as I realized the earth was spinning, which we never realized, right? We're walking, you're not feeling, we're moving right now hundreds of miles an hour. I laid down and thought of this prayer. What are humans that God is mindful of us, of our lives? Individual people in a universe so vast. I laid down and closed my eyes, thankful that I had woken up and spotted the sight. Grateful for life. Not just my life, but life. That life was all around me in that bottom of that desert land as the Colorado River ran past. The 8th Psalm is a prayer of wonder. It begins and ends with the word of praise, O Lord our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. It is a word of praise that's spewed out after looking at the majesty of the night sky. You have set your glory above the heavens, she sings, perhaps imagining a crystal palace beyond the stars, something more glorious than what you can see in the shield of the night sky. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, I think, what are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? Her wonder causes her to consider her own life, which she feels small at the sight of these millions of stars. And among billions of stars and the light years between them, we are all on this little blue dot that floats in an orbit around the sun, which is just one ordinary star among all the millions of stars that are out there. What are we in all of this? Tonight, if you would drive a distance from the city and find a dark space, and you could look up in the night sky and see what this psalmist saw 2,500 years ago. And long after we are gone, those stars will still be there, sparkling in the night, causing others to wonder, and maybe say this prayer as well. Such wondering takes us beyond ourselves, makes us realize that there is an expanse beyond the length of our living. It brings us to God, to meaning, to try to figure out this world that we have constructed. One of the ways to survive in the 21st century is to cultivate wonder. There is so much in our 24/7 world that just comes and comes and comes and comes, and it is hard to take time to wonder. Cultivating wonder gets us beyond the digital world that we have constructed, beyond the civilization that we have crafted, beyond the negativity and the fears that are prompted in our society. It delivers us back to the essence of what it means to be alive on this planet and in this universe, and made, as the psalmist said, a little lower than the angels. I'm going to suggest to you some ways that you can cultivate wonder in your own life. My wondering here with you, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a beginning. And what I want to say is, one of the best things to start cultivating wonder is to spend some time being bored. Yes, being bored. We live in a society, in a world, with the phones in our pockets or the phones on our wrists, in which we never have a moment just to be bored, just to let our mind wander. Watch people when you're out. You will see them. If they're standing in line for something, to be a couple of minutes waiting in line, either for something at Chick-fil-A, or heaven forbid you have to go to the DMV and get a license or something, and that may be 45 minutes rather than a couple of minutes at Chick-fil-A. People cannot stand it. They have to pull their phone. They cannot have a moment just to stand there thinking about whatever. If your mind is always going where your phone and its algorithms tell you to go, how can you ever figure out, just wondering about your life, how can you figure out what you should do this week? How should you figure out the relationships in your life if you never have time? Just let your mind wander about them. So the first step in cultivating wonder is just try to be bored once in a while, right? Boredom is a gift to your mind and soul. In order to wander, you have to let your mind wander. No wandering, no wondering. One of the things that can help us to cultivate wonder is to take time in our day that's no phone time. Now, I'm not going to tell you how much of that. For some of you, just 10 minutes would be all. You start shaking after that, right? Withdrawal will start to hit you, right? But whatever it is, find time to have no phone time every day in your life. We've got to be able to disconnect from the internet for a few moments in order to reconnect with the essence of what it means to live in this world in relationship with God. To reconnect with the essence, to being a mortal human being, living in nature, having only one place to be at one time. Finding ways to turn your phone off and take a hike or a walk, or read a book, an actual book, not individual pieces on a screen, or a magazine. Because when you do those things, your mind, you will stop reading at some point, and you will let your mind wander about what you've just read. Somehow it's different when you read it on a screen. Or maybe write some poetry, like the song that this person wrote after looking at the night sky. Or maybe some art. Bev's watercolors this fall would be a good thing, right? Just take some time to let your mind and your artistic nature just take off. Daydreaming is a gift from God that we greatly underappreciate. The Bible declares that one of God's top 10 commandments, right? If you watch sports on ESPN, you get the top 10 plays of the day. The Bible has top 10 commandments, and one of those is Sabbath rest. They didn't have smartphones back then. But taking a rest from the digital world and re-entering natural world is one way to begin cultivating wonder. Second idea. To cultivate wonder requires that we begin looking at the world with soft eyes. I mentioned this last week and gave an example of that, and I won't go into those details, but the term soft eyes refers to just kind of relaxing your vision and taking in the full expanse, the whole periphery of what you're seeing. Most of the time we focus on one thing. Right now, most of you are focused on me. You focus on one thing and look at that. But soft eyes looks at everything around you. It's a term that includes just listening to people with soft eyes. It means listening for all the cues they're giving you. Not just the words they're saying, but their body language, the tone of their words, the way that they're looking around them. Look at the world with soft eyes. Pretty well for me with the invisible gorilla test. Anybody know about that? The invisible gorilla test. Is this a new thing to you? Oh, interesting. Some of you know about that. Yes. So about 15 years ago, some sociologists were wanting to experiment on how much of the world do people see. And you can Google this. Not during your no phone time. Later on. Okay. But you'll have to make sure you use an updated version because I'm going to tell you part of what happens. So in the experiment, they had about 8 people who were in a circle, and they were moving about in a circle, and they had a dart ball black ball and they had a white ball, and some of the people were in white gowns, some like our robes today, some were in darker robes, and they were passing balls back and forth as they moved around. And when you did the experiment, you're supposed to count how many times the black ball was passed. That was your job. Look at this video. How many times was the black ball passed? Meanwhile, in the midst of all that, a man in a gorilla suit walks in the middle of the video, stops in the middle, pounds his chest, and then walks off. Only 50% of the people saw the man in the gorilla suit. Alright? Now that I've told you this, if you go on Google and look it up, you're going to see the gorilla. But if you use a newer version, just try it out. See what happens. Because what happens is when we're focused on what we're doing, if you're focusing on how many times that ball is passed, you don't notice with soft eyes what's going on. And we do this all the time in our lives. Things happen before us in a room and we will not even realize what's happening. Or we will be listening to people talking and we will miss half of what they're saying because we're thinking about what we want to say, or we're not listening with soft eyes and we're not listening to how they're saying it. Cultivating wonder is by expanding how we're listening, how we're looking, to see all that is around us and what's happening. And some of that is also seeing within us what's happening in me right now. Because if I'm anxious, if I'm worried, if I'm afraid of what I'm going to say next, I'm probably not listening well. So if I can calm myself, I can take a deep breath and just say, whatever happens, it's going to be okay. It enables us to listen better and to see better the world that's all around us. To look at the world with soft eyes allows us to see the unexpected. And to see the unexpected is to see what God is doing in the world. Third thing to help cultivate wonder is to ask curious questions. Become an explorer, right? Maybe once we felt like there's nothing left to explore. The whole world has been explored. The internet is out there. We can explore. We can all be explorers if we just ask curious questions about what's happening around us. In 1492, when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, there was no map to guide him because no one ever sailed all across the ocean like that. Everything he encountered was valuable information. Everything had to be written down. He kept journals of that trip and the subsequent ones. When he encountered the Caribbean islands, he began mapping out the islands as best he could. He recorded new animal and plant species, the natives and their societies. It opened up a whole new world to people from Europe. And for the time being, we just set aside the grievous exploitation of the native peoples, which happened, and which we all have in some sense benefit from. Just focus for a moment about how it changed the world. Within 100 years of Columbus sailing the ocean blue, the Catholic Church would erupt into Reformation. Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci would craft some of art's greatest masterpieces. Shakespeare would begin writing some of the best plays of human history that are still acted out now in summer parks and theaters. Copernicus would make his observation of the sun and that the sun and not the earth was the center of our solar system. Telescopes would be invented whereby scientists like Galileo would confirm these calculations, and newspapers began to spring up all across Europe, spreading these new ideas like pollen carried by the spring winds. Once different questions began to be asked, all sorts of new answers began to happen. When we ask curious questions, different questions, we begin hearing different answers. We begin seeing the world in different ways. We begin understanding our faith in more deeper and powerful ways. Explorers ask curious questions, not to solve problems. They ask relationship questions, not investigative questions. Investigative questions go along these lines. How, what, when, who? How did this happen? What happened? When Columbus landed on San Salvador, he did not ask these questions. He asked, where am I? Who are these people? What does this mean? Why did this happen? Explorers seek understanding, not solutions. Understanding. We're so busy oftentimes trying to fix things, and there are a number of things in our lives and in our church and our society that need to be fixed, but understanding is the first step. Can't really fix something if I don't understand it. Explorers ask clarifying questions, curious questions, so that they can understand their situation. These curious questions always set off new ideas, which bring new questions to ask, which set off new ideas, which bring new questions to ask. And it's a circle that keeps going around and around and around. The smartest people are the ones who know that they don't know, and they keep asking questions. When you're exploring, nothing can be wrong because every explored pathway yields new information, and even your mistakes teach you new things. There's no right or wrong in explorers. They're just gaining more and more and more understanding. To cultivate wonder, we break down the walls that are always being built in our society, telling us who's supposed to believe this, and who's supposed to believe that, and who's right and who's wrong. Explorers break down those walls. Wonder breaks down those walls because it digs deeper than the surface of what we see. Annie Dillard ends her masterpiece For the Time Being, which I must say is my favorite book of all time. She ends this book, For the Time Being, with a short little story. In Papua New Guinea, a British officer named James Taylor made first contact with a mountain village in the 1930s that was situated far up into the forest, 3,000 feet above the ocean level. This tribe had never seen a white man. After a short stay, he was delayed in leaving because of the courage of one of the villagers. On an airstrip that had been hacked out of a flat spot in the mountain near the village, this brave man had cut vines and lashed himself to the fuselage of the small airplane. To his family, who were scared to death of what was about to happen, he told them that no matter what, he had to find out where this thing came from and what was out there. Friends, this is the pursuit of wonder. And this is the human journey, right? All of us are trying to figure out what's out there, right? What's beyond this temporal existence? What's beyond what we have here towards this God that we worship? And in this journey of life, which we begin in baptismal waters and take that journey of wondering and cultivating what's going to happen and asking curious questions, this lifelong journey of trying to understand our existence deeper and deeper and deeper till the moment, we hope, when we'll meet God. One day all of us will be lashed on the fuselage of death and fly into the mystery of God to see what's on the other side. This man, his own courage, typified this human experience. There is more than what we experience. God is waiting to give it to us. We will cultivate a wonder for our lives and for this world and for this faith that God seeks to connect us through. May we be explorers of God's wonder that's out there and in each of us.